Joachim Peiper, The Scarred Legacy. From Himmler's favored adjutant to a ruthless tank commander and convicted war criminal, Joachim Peiper carved a path through the brutal heart of World War II, his name forever stained by the atrocities committed under his command, even as he sought to rewrite his own dark history. The Shadow of Ideology. The name Joachim Peiper echoes with the chilling clang of paradox, a German SS colonel, a convicted war criminal, and, in the twilight of his life, a humble car salesman. His journey, from the meticulous order of Heinrich Himmler's inner circle to the chaotic, blood-soaked fields of battle, paints a stark portrait of a man consumed by an ideology that promised glory and delivered infamy. According to German historian Jens Vestermeyer, Peiper was the very embodiment of Nazi conviction, a commander purportedly ruthless, a glory hound indifferent to the lives of his men within Battle Group Peiper. He not only tolerated but actively encouraged acts of unthinkable cruelty by his Waffen-SS soldiers. As Himmler's personal adjutant, Peiper bore witness to the chilling machinery of the Holocaust. He saw the systematic ethnic cleansing, the genocide unfolding across Eastern Europe, truths he would later twist, obscure, and outright deny in the hollow decades after the war. Yet, on the front lines, his role was equally grim. A tank commander in the 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, LSAH, he raged across both eastern and western fronts. First as a battalion leader, then a regimental commander, Peiper fought in the desperate Third Battle of Kharkiv and the brutal crucible of the Battle of the Bulge. These were the campaigns where his eponymous Kampfgruppe Peiper would brand itself with a dark notoriety for savage war crimes against both civilians and prisoners of war. Released from the confines of prison, Peiper sought anonymity, finding work first with Porsche, then Volkswagen, before retreating to the quiet corners of France as a freelance translator. But the past, like a shadow, refused to be shaken. Throughout his post-war years, he remained a fervent node in the clandestine network of former SS men orbiting the right-wing organization HIAG, the Mutual Aid Association of former members of the Waffen-SS. It was in France in 1976 that the long-held secrets finally ignited. Communist arsonists, having unmasked his true identity, set his home ablaze. Peiper perished, suffocated by the smoke, a final violent end to a life steeped in violence. Roots of a Zealot. Joachim Peiper first drew breath on January 30, 1915, in Wilmersdorf, a Berlin district nestled within a sprawling German empire. He was the third son, born into a middle-class family with roots stretching deep into German Silesia. His father, Woldemar Peiper, carried the weight of military heritage, an officer in the Imperial German Army. He'd fought in the 1904 campaign in German Southwest Africa, where malaria first claimed his health, and a severe wound later demobilized him. Yet the call of duty was strong. Woldemar Peiper rejoined the Prussian army in 1907, and again for the maelstrom of the First World War, serving a stint in Ottoman Turkey. There, the lingering specter of malaria exacerbated chronic heart problems, ultimately leading to his second demobilization from active duty. But Woldemar Peiper was not a man to rest. In the interwar period, he plunged into the ranks of the Freikorps, a company of mercenary soldiers actively suppressing the Polish Silesian uprisings. These were conflicts driven by the ambition to annex German Silesia to the nascent Second Polish Republic. In the Weimar Germany of the 1920s, the venomous anti-Semitic canards of Nazi ideology, the stab-in-the-back myth, the fabricated protocols of the Elders of Zion, the International Jew, found fertile ground among political conservatives and reactionaries. Men like Woldemar Peiper, a Freikorps mercenary, seethed with anger over the Imperial Germany's defeat in the Great War, and these narratives offered a comforting, if monstrous, explanation. Two of Woldemar's sons, Horst and Joachim, would follow the same bleak trajectory of nationalist fervor
and military service. In 1926, an 11-year-old Joachim trailed his older brother, 14-year-old Horst, into the Boy Scouts, where the seeds of military ambition began to sprout. Horst, the middle brother, joined the Schutzstaffel, SS, and served as a guard in a Nazi concentration camp with the SS Totenkopf-Verden. Later, transferred to active duty as a Waffen-SS soldier, Horst fought in the 1940 Battle of France as part of the 3rd SS Panzer Division. His life ended mysteriously in Poland in June 1941, in an accident never fully explained. Whispers suggested his fellow SS men drove him to suicide due to his homosexuality. Peiper's eldest brother, Hans Hasso, born in 1910, suffered from mental illness. A suicide attempt left him with severe brain damage, reducing him to a persistent vegetative state. Confined to a hospital in 1931, Hans succumbed to tuberculosis in 1942.
Embracing the black uniform. Joachim Peiper was a mere 18 years old when he joined the Hitler Youth, alongside his brother Horst. In October 1933, drawn by the allure of power and belonging, Peiper volunteered for the Schutzstaffel, SS, entering its cavalry branch. His first superior officer was Gustav Lombard, a zealous Nazi who would later command a regimental unit notoriously efficient in the mass murder of Jews in the occupied Soviet Union, notably during punitive operations like the Pripyat Marshes massacres of July-August 1941 in Belarusia. On January 23, 1934, he ascended to SS Mann, signifying his entry as a full SS man even before the Schutzstaffel gained independence from the Sturmabteilung within the Nazi Party. Later that year, at the 1934 Nuremberg rally, Peiper was promoted to SS Sturmenmann. It was here that his bearing and reputation caught the discerning eye of Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler. To Himmler, Peiper seemingly personified the Aryan ideal, the master race concept, central to the SS officer school's twisted curriculum. Though not the towering, blonde, and muscular figure of the stereotypical Nordic recruit, Peiper compensated with his handsome features, personable demeanor, and an undeniable self-confidence that marked him as an SS officer destined for advancement. The SS formally employed Peiper in January 1935, subsequently dispatching him to a rigorous military leadership course. As an SS leadership student, Peiper garnered favorable and approving reviews from his instructors. Yet the military psychologists offered only conditional approval, their reports noting his pronounced egocentricity, a consistently negative attitude, and his relentless attempts to leverage his personal connection to Reichsführer SS Himmler. Their unsettling conclusion: Peiper might well become either a difficult subordinate or an arrogant superior as his career within the SS unfolded. On March 1, 1938, 2 years after becoming an SS man, Peiper received his NSDP identity card. In the post-war era, Peiper would persistently deny having ever been a member of the Nazi Party, a denial that starkly contradicted his carefully cultivated image of a common man, merely a soldier, fighting in the Second World War.
Himmler's confidant. In June 1938, Peiper's career took a significant turn as he became an adjutant to Reichsführer SS Himmler. This assignment was considered by Himmler to be indispensable administrative training for any SS leader destined for promotion. During this period, the officers serving within Himmler's personal staff operated under the direct command of SS functionary Karl Wolff. Peiper found himself working in the anteroom of the SS main office in Berlin, rapidly ascending to the status of one of Himmler's favorite adjutants. By 1939, Peiper invariably accompanied the Reichsführer SS at every official function, mirroring Himmler's admiration. On September 1, 1939, Nazi Germany's invasion of Poland ignited the Second World War in Europe. Adjutant Peiper traveled in the personal train of Reichsführer SS Himmler. On occasion, Peiper served as the liaison officer to Hitler himself, especially when the Führer journeyed by train with Erwin Rommel or met with Wehrmacht and Waffen-SS generals near the front lines of the Eastern Front. On September 20, in the northern Polish city of Bydgoszcz, Himmler and Peiper bore witness to the public executions of 20 Polish social leaders, individuals deemed capable of organizing partisan resistance to Nazi occupation. This chilling demonstration of the Holocaust's mechanics of ethnic cleansing was orchestrated by the paramilitary Volksdeutscher Selbstschutz, an ethnic German self-defense militia commanded by Ludolf von Alvensleben, the local SSN police leader. Later, in a conversation with the explorer Ernst Schaefer, Peiper coldly rationalized the SS actions to hunt and kill the Polish intelligentsia, ascribing sole command responsibility to Hitler and his superior orders to Himmler. As an active participant in the Nazi conquest of Poland for German Lebensraum, Peiper observed the administrative refinement of SS policies, witnessing the development of ever more effective methods of killing for ethnic cleansing, all designed to depopulate Polish lands for German colonists. On December 13, 1939, in west-central Poland, at the village of Owinska, near Poznan, Himmler and Peiper stood by as the Aktion T4 program carried out the mass killing of mentally ill patients in a psychiatric hospital using poison gas. In post-war interrogations by U.S. Army JAG and military intelligence officers, Peiper recounted his eyewitness experience of mass murder with chilling factual detachment. Peiper: monotone, detached. The action was done before a circle of invited guests. The insane were led into a prepared casemate, the door of which had a plexiglass window. After the door was closed, one could see how, in the beginning, the insane still laughed and talked to each other. But soon they sat down on the straw, obviously under the influence of the gas. Very soon they no longer moved. Throughout 1940, Himmler and Peiper embarked on an inspection tour of Nazi Germany's concentration camps, including Neuengamme in the north and Sachsenhausen in the northeast. In occupied Poland, Himmler conferred with Friedrich Wilhelm Krüger, the higher SS and Polizei leader, and his subordinate, Odilo Globocnik, the SS bureaucrat tasked with deporting Jews from Warsaw and Lublin and from Polish territories already annexed as Lebensraum. In April 1940, the grim tour continued at Buchenwald and Flossenburg concentration camps. SS and police leader Wilhelm Redier and SS official Otto Rasch were actively striving to devise quicker methods for killing civilians, accelerating the depopulation of Poland for German colonization. In May 1940, Globocnik demonstrated the efficacy of the Aktion T4 program for the involuntary euthanasia of disabled and crippled individuals for Himmler and Peiper, and also discussed Globocnik's work in the Lublin Reservation Program for the control and confinement of the Jewish populations of the Greater Germanic Reich.
The French Campaign and Himmler's Shadow. In May 1940, Peiper closely followed the Waffen-SS throughout the Battle of France. On May 18, Peiper took on a platoon leader role within a unit of the LSAHH motorized regiment. For audacious soldiering, exemplified by his platoon's capture of a French artillery battery atop the Wattenberg Hills south of Valenciennes, Peiper was awarded the Iron Cross Second Class and promoted to SS Hauptsturmführer, a captain. On June 19, 1940, his audacious soldiering earned him the Iron Cross First Class. As a further reward, Peiper secured a sports car for his personal use, though Himmler subsequently ordered the vehicle added to the motor pool inventory of his personal staff. By June 21, 1940, Peiper had returned to his role as personal adjutant to Himmler. On September 7, 1940, Himmler addressed the commanders of the LSAHH motorized regiment, thanking them. "We had to have the toughness, this should be said and soon forgotten, to shoot thousands of leading Poles." He went on to underscore the psychological toll on Waffen-SS soldiers, carrying out executions, hauling away people, and evicting crying and hysterical women in the brutal process of clearing Polish lands for German colonization.
Following an official visit to Francoist Spain to meet Generalissimo Francisco Franco in October 1940, Peiper was promoted to first adjutant on November 1, 1940. Operation Barbarossa and the Eastern Front. In February 1941, Reichsfuhrer SS Himmler informed Adjutant Peiper about the impending Operation Barbarossa, the massive invasion, conquest, and German colonization of the Soviet Union scheduled for June 22 to December 5, 1941. Himmler and his staff traveled extensively through occupied Poland, Norway, Nazi Austria, and occupied Greece, observing the progress of the Wehrmacht and Waffen-SS operations, including the methodical depopulation of Poland for German colonization. Regarding his visit to the Wood Ghetto, Peiper noted, "It was a macabre image. We saw how the Jewish ghetto police, who wore hats without rims and were armed with wooden clubs, inconsiderately made room for us." This anecdote, while revealing Peiper's awareness of the Nazi occupation's criminality, was seemingly crafted to deflect his complicity, attributing abuse to the Jewish ghetto police. From June 11 to 15, 1941, Adjutant Peiper participated in a pivotal SS conference where Himmler unveiled plans for the extermination of 30 million Slavs in Eastern Europe, specifically Russia and Ukraine. Present at this chilling meeting were Kurt Wolff, Kurt Dallueg, head of the Order Police, Erich von dem Bach-Zalewski, SS and police leader in Belorussia, and Reinhard Heydrich, head of the Reich Security Main Office. When Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union on June 21, 1941, Himmler toured the conquered Soviet lands in a headquarters train, accompanied by Peiper, to inspect the work of the Einsatzkommando units engaged in depopulating the seized territories. In Augustów, Poland, the Einsatzkommando Tilsit murdered approximately 200 people. In Grodno, Belorussia, before Himmler and Peiper, Heydrich openly chastised the local death squad leader for having shot only 96 Jews in a single day. In July 1941, Himmler and Peiper were in Białystok, witnessing the progress of the city's depopulation by Order Police battalions. There they met with Bach-Zalewski to discuss the deployment of units from the Kommandostab Reichsfuhrer SS, comprising 25,000 Waffen-SS soldiers explicitly tasked with executing racial and ideological warfare against the peoples of Russia. These Kommandostab units operated under the authority of local higher SS and police leaders, who identified the target populations of Jews and other undesirables marked for extermination. As the first and second adjutants, Peiper and Werner Grothmann were privy to and handled all of Himmler's orders and communications. Peiper himself delivered the Kommandostab's daily body count reports to Himmler. A July 30, 1941 report from Gustav Lombard's SS cavalry indicated they had shot 800 Jews. An August 11, 1941 report from Lombard detailed the shooting of 6,526 looters, a euphemism for Jews. Peiper likewise presented Himmler with the daily Einsatzgruppen murder statistics, comparing the numbers of people killed against the pre-war projections for the timeline of depopulating the Soviet Union. Peiper's adjutancy to Himmler concluded in the summer of 1941, and he was reassigned to the LSSAH motorized regiment in October of that year. He rejoined the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler as they fought on the Eastern Front near the Black Sea. Stepping in for an injured company commander, Peiper took command of the 11th Company and engaged the Red Army at Mariupol in Ukraine and Rostov-on-Don in southern Russia. Noted for his ferocious fighting spirit and aggressive leadership, Peiper's victories as a tank commander often came at a high cost in German tanks and Waffen-SS infantry casualties. The LSSAH division was followed by Einsatzgruppe D, responsible for the mass murder of local Jews, other civilians, commissars, Red Army soldiers, and partisans.
To expedite the depopulation of the Western Soviet Union, SS General Sepp Dietrich, commander of the LSSAH, volunteered his Waffen-SS infantry to assist the Einsatzgruppe in the massacre of 1,800 people at the Gully of Petrushino. In May 1942, the LSSAH was redeployed to Vichy, France for rest, recuperation, and refitting, subsequently reorganized into a Panzer Grenadier Division. Peiper was promoted to commander of the 3rd Battalion.
The Blowtorch Battalion. Peiper's battalion departed France in January 1943, bound for the Eastern Front, where the Wehrmacht was beginning to lose its initiative, particularly evident in the Battle of Stalingrad. During the Third Battle of Kharkov, the battalion gained notoriety for an audacious rescue of the encircled 320th Infantry Division. In a letter home, Peiper described the brutal hand-to-hand fighting with a Soviet ski battalion as he struggled to lead the division, including its sick and wounded, to safety. The rescue culminated in a fierce battle with Soviet forces at the village of Krasnaya Polyana. Upon entering the village, Peiper's troops made a terrible discovery. All the men in his small rearguard medical detachment left behind had been killed and then mutilated. An SS sergeant in Peiper's ration supply company later testified that Peiper's response was equally brutal. In the village, the 2 petrol trucks were burned and 25 Germans killed by partisans and Soviet soldiers. As revenge, Peiper ordered the burning down of the whole village and the shooting of its inhabitants. This testimony was later obtained by the Western Allies in November 1944. On May 6, 1943, Peiper was awarded the German Cross in Gold for his achievements in February around Kharkov, where his unit earned the grim moniker Blowtorch Battalion. Reportedly, the nickname stemmed from the torching and slaughter of 2 Soviet villages, their inhabitants either shot or burned alive. Ukrainian sources, including surviving witness Ivan Kiselev, who was 14 years old at the time, described the killings at the villages of Yefremovka and Semyonovka on February 17, 1943. On February 12, LSSS troops occupied the 2 villages, where retreating Soviet forces had wounded 2 SS officers. 5 days later, LSSS troops killed 872 men, women, and children in retaliation. Some 240 of these were burned alive in the church of Yefremovka. In August 1944, an SS commander, formerly of LSSAH, captured south of Falaise in France, told Allied interrogators that Peiper was particularly eager to execute the order to burn villages. Peiper himself, in a letter to Pothast in March 1943, chillingly wrote, "Our reputation precedes us as a wave of terror and is one of our best weapons. Even old Genghis Khan would gladly have hired us as assistants." On May 9, 1943, Peiper received the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, the Third Reich's most prestigious military decoration. Reichsführer SS Himmler personally congratulated him in a live radio broadcast. "Heartfelt congratulations for the Knight Cross, my dear Joachim. I am proud of you." At this stage of the war, Nazi propaganda elevated Tank Commander Peiper to an exemplary military leader. The official SS newspaper, Das Schwarzkorps, declared that Peiper's actions in Kharkov proved him to be a Waffen-SS tank commander who was the master of the situation in all its phases, whose quick decision-making ensured victory through bold and unorthodox orders. He was depicted as a born leader, one filled with the highest sense of responsibility for the life of every one of his men, but who was also able to be hard, if necessary, to complete the mission. In the post-war period, such hyperbolic descriptions of Peiper's tactical prowess would glamorize the Waffen-SS man into a German war hero. In the SS hierarchy, Peiper was an SS man and military officer who received, obeyed, and executed orders with minimal discussion, and expected his soldiers to receive, obey, and execute his orders without question.
In July 1943, the Panzergrenadier Division LSSAH participated in Operation Citadel in the Kursk area where Kampfgruppe Peiper fought effectively against the Red Army. After Operation Citadel failed, the Panzergrenadier Division LSSAH was redeployed from the Eastern Front in Russia to northern fascist Italy.
The Massacre at Beauvais. In August 1943, Kampfgruppe Peiper was stationed in the Italian city of Cuneo, a mere 6 kilometers north of the village of Beauvais. Fascist Italy ceased being a belligerent power of the Rome-Berlin axis on September 3, 1943, with the signing of the Armistice of Cassibile between the Kingdom of Italy and the Allied powers. Consequently, Nazi Germany responded on September 8 with Operation Ochse, an invasion and occupation of northern Italy by Wehrmacht forces, including the LAASH, to forcibly disarm the Italian army in situ. On September 19, 1943, a firefight erupted between Waffen-SS occupiers and partisan guerrillas of the Italian resistance movement near Beauvais, in the Piedmont region of northwest Italy. 1 SS soldier was killed, and 2 others were captured. A subsequent firefight involving a Waffen-SS infantry company failed to rescue their comrades. Following this, Peiper asserted strategic control over the streets and roads leading into and out of Beauvais. Peiper then issued a chilling threat: destroy the village if the partisans did not release their Waffen-SS prisoners. In a desperate attempt to avert the Nazis' destruction of Beauvais, local spokesman, the parish priest Giuseppe Bernardi, and businessman Alessandro Vassallo successfully negotiated the partisans' release of both their Waffen-SS prisoners and the body of the fallen SS soldier. Despite this successful negotiation, Peiper ordered the soldiers of Kampfgruppe Peiper to summarily execute 24 men from the village of Beauvais in brutal retaliation for the villagers' resistance. They also killed a woman during the looting and burning of her home. In the after-action report to LASH headquarters, Kampfgruppe Peiper grotesquely misrepresented the Beauvais massacre as Peiper's heroic defense against anti-German attacks by communist partisans. The report claimed Waffen-SS soldiers battled, defeated, and killed 17 bandits and partisans, and that, during the fights with partisans, the villages of Beauvais and Costellar were burned down, that in nearly all the burning houses, stores of ammunition exploded. Some bandits were shot.
Return to Ukraine and command style. In November 1943, the LSAHH found itself embroiled in battles at Zhytomyr in Ukraine. During the fierce fighting, Peiper, despite his limited experience in leading tanks, stepped into the void left by the regiment's fallen commander, assuming command of the 1st SS Panzer Regiment. In early December, Peiper was nominated for a medal, lauded for the 1st Regiment's successes, the destruction of several Red Army artillery batteries and a division headquarters, claiming 2,280 Red Army soldiers killed in just 2 days, December 5th and 6th. Only 3 Red Army prisoners of war were delivered to military intelligence. The recommendation for Peiper's medal described the scorched earth tactics of the 1st SS Panzer Regiment, detailing how Tank Commander Peiper attacked with all weapons and flamethrowers from his SPW, armored fighting vehicle, to defeat the Red Army defenders, then completely destroyed the village of Pekarchina. Peiper's overly aggressive leadership style often caused him to disregard tactical common sense in deploying his tanks and infantry. His battlefield victories came at a greater cost in Waffen-SS casualties, soldiers killed and wounded, than would have been lost with textbook tactics. Attacking without prior reconnaissance, Peiper's frontal assaults against entrenched Red Army units resulted in excessive infantry losses and materiel wastage, often yielding essentially Pyrrhic victories. Consequently, after just 1 month under Peiper's command, the 1st SS Panzer Regiment possessed only 12 functional tanks. In December 1943, due to his destructive leadership of the 1st SS Panzer Regiment in the Soviet Union, the LSAHH Division Command relieved Peiper of combat duty, transferring him to staff officer duties at the division headquarters. Despite his inconsistent battlefield performance on the Eastern Front, his political value for Nazi propaganda outweighed his shortcomings as a military officer. Thus, on January 27, 1944, Hitler personally presented Peiper with the oak leaves.
Western Front and nervous breakdown. In March 1944, the LSSAH was pulled from the Eastern Front and sent to Nazi-occupied Belgium for reformation. New and replacement soldiers were integrated into their ranks. Most were adolescent boys, a stark contrast to the fanatical Nazi ideologues from the 1930s. The grueling training and brutal hazing rituals imposed on these new recruits resulted in the execution of 5 soldiers for failing to meet Kampfgruppe Peiper's exacting standards. SS Obersturmbannführer Peiper then ordered the new soldiers to gaze upon the corpses of their failed comrades. In 1956, West German judicial authorities initiated a war crime investigation into the accusation that Peiper deliberately killed some of his own Waffen-SS soldiers for unit discipline. In 1966, Peiper claimed ignorance, and, lacking contradictory evidence or witnesses, the case was closed. As the Allied invasion, Operation Overlord, commenced on June 6, 1944, the LSSAH was deployed to the English Channel coast, positioned to confront the anticipated Allied invasion at Pas-de-Calais in northern France. Transport to the front lines was severely restricted, and Allied air forces dominated the skies. From July 18, 1944, the Kampfgruppe Peiper Regiment saw action, though Peiper himself rarely commanded from the front lines due to the uneven terrain and the necessity of radio silence. Like other Waffen-SS and Wehrmacht units in the area, Kampfgruppe Peiper fought defensively until Operation Cobra, from July 25 to 31, 1944, shattered the German front, with the U.S. Army destroying every LSSAH tank and inflicting 25% casualties on their force of 19,618 soldiers. After suffering a nervous breakdown during the intense fighting around Caen, Peiper was relieved of command on August 2, 1944. In September and October 1944, he was hospitalized, first in Paris, then at Tegernsee Reserve Hospital in Bavaria, near his wife, Sigi, and children. Consequently, Peiper was not in command of the 1st SS Panzer Regiment during Operation Lüttich, the series of failed counterattacks at Avranches from August 7 to 13, 1944. He rejoined his regiment in October 1944. In November, the 1st SS Panzer Corps was moved to the Cologne area to assist with cleanup after Allied bombing. The new recruits were appalled by the grim task of retrieving mashed and mangled bodies. Peiper remarked, "Their hatred for the enemy was such, I swear it, I could not always keep it under control." After visiting Düren after a raid, he confessed that he wanted to castrate the swine who did this with a broken glass bottle. Peiper and his men longed for revenge.
The Battle of the Bulge and Malmedy. In the autumn of 1944, the Wehrmacht relentlessly repelled Allied assaults to breach and cross the Siegfried Line, while Hitler desperately sought an opportunity to seize the initiative on the Western Front. The result was Nazi Germany's Ardennes offensive, a desperate strategic gamble wherein German armies intended to smash through U.S. lines in the Ardennes forest, cross the river Meuse, and then capture the city of Antwerp to break and divide the Allied front. The 6th Panzer Army was tasked with penetrating the American lines between Aachen and the Schnee-Eifel, with the objective of seizing the bridges over the Meuse on both sides of Liège. The 6th Panzer Army designated the SS Adolf Leifstandarte Hitler as the Mobile Strike Force, under the command of SS Oberführer Wilhelm Mohnke. 4 combined arms battle groups formed the 6th Panzer Division. Peiper commanded Kampfgruppe Peiper, the best equipped of these, which included the 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion, armed with 70-ton Tiger II tanks. Kampfgruppe Peiper's mission was to seize the bridges on the Meuse River between Liège and Eu. To address the critical fuel shortage, headquarters provided Peiper with a map indicating the locations of U.S. Army fuel depots, which he intended to capture from the few American soldiers manning them. The 6th Panzer Army assigned Kampfgruppe Peiper to routes that included narrow, single-lane roads, forcing the infantry, armored vehicles, and tanks to travel as a convoy approximately 25 kilometers long. Peiper complained that the assigned roads were suitable for bicycles, not tanks. Yet his chief of staff, Fritz Kramer, sternly told Peiper, "I don't care how and what you do. Just make it to the Meuse, even if you've only 1 tank left when you get there." Peiper's vehicles reached their point of departure at midnight, delaying Kampfgruppe Peiper's attack by nearly 24 hours. The initial plan was to advance through Losheimer Graben, but the 2 infantry divisions tasked with opening the route for Kampfgruppe Peiper failed on the first day. On the morning of December 17, Peiper captured Honsfeld and its crucial U.S. Army fuel stores. Peiper continued west until the road became impassable a short distance from Ligneville, a detour that forced Peiper's units towards the Baugnes crossroads near Malmedy, Belgium. During Peiper's advance on December 17, 1944, his armored units and half-tracks encountered a lightly armed convoy of about 30 American vehicles at the Baugnes crossroads near Malmedy, Belgium. The American troops, mainly elements of the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion, were swiftly overwhelmed and captured. Along with other American prisoners of war captured earlier, they were ordered to stand in a meadow before the Germans opened fire on them with machine guns, killing 84 soldiers and leaving their bodies in the snow. The survivors managed to reach American lines later that day, and their horrific story rapidly spread throughout the American front lines. In Honsfeld, Peiper's men murdered several other American prisoners. Other murders of POWs and civilians were reported in Bouillingen, Ligneville, and Stavelot, Chenu, La Glaise, and Stoumont on December 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. On December 19, in the area between Stavelot and Trois-Ponts, while the Germans attempted to regain control of the bridge over the Amblève River, crucial for allowing reinforcements and supplies to reach them, men from Kampfgruppe Peiper raped and killed a number of Belgian civilians. The battle group was eventually declared responsible for the deaths of 362 prisoners of war and 111 civilians.
Defeat and retreat.
Peiper crossed Ligneuville and reached the heights of Stavelot on the left bank of the Amblève River at nightfall on the second day of the operation. The battle group paused for the night, granting the Americans precious time to reorganize. After heavy fighting, Peiper's armor finally crossed the bridge on the Amblève. The spearhead pushed on, without having fully secured Stavelot. By then, the critical element of surprise had vanished. U.S. forces regrouped and systematically blew up several bridges ahead of Peiper's advance, effectively trapping the battle group in the deep valley of the Amblève, downstream from Trois Ponts. The weather also turned, clearing the skies and allowing Allied air forces to operate. Airstrikes destroyed or heavily damaged numerous German vehicles. Peiper's command descended into disarray. Some units had become lost in the difficult terrain or in the darkness, while company commanders, preferring to remain with Peiper at the head of the column, were unable to provide guidance to their own units. Peiper attacked Stoumont on December 19, taking the town amidst fierce fighting. However, he failed to protect his rear, allowing American troops to cut him off from the only possible supply road for ammunition and fuel at Stavelot. Without supplies, and with no contact with other German units behind him, Peiper could advance no further. American attacks on Stoumont forced the remnants of the battle group to retreat to La Glaise. On December 24, Peiper abandoned his vehicles and retreated with his remaining men. German wounded and American prisoners were also left behind. According to Peiper, only 717 men out of the original 3,000 returned to German lines at the beginning of the operation. Despite the failure of Peiper's battle group and the loss of all tanks, Mahon recommended Peiper for a further award. The events at the Bognac crossroads were described in glowing terms, without regard for threats from the flanks, and only inspired by the thought of a deep breakthrough. The Kampf group proceeded to Ligneuville and destroyed at Bognac an enemy supply column, and after the annihilation of the units blocking their advance, succeeded in causing the staff of the 49th Anti-Aircraft Brigade to flee. Rather than a stain on Peiper's honor, the killing of POWs was celebrated in official records. In January 1945, the swords were added to his Knight's Cross. The great fame of Peiper as a Waffen-SS commander during the Battle of the Bulge was thus born.
Hungary and capture. In early 1945, in Hungary, Kampfgruppe Peiper fought in Operation Southwind from February 17th to 24th, and in Operation Spring Awakening from March 6th to 15th. In these battles, despite inflicting heavy casualties on the enemy, Peiper's aggressive command style resulted in significantly more wounded and dead Waffen-SS soldiers than were necessary to achieve victory. On May 1, 1945, as the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler was forced into Austria, Peiper's men learned of the Führer's death the previous day. On May 8, the German High Command ordered the units of the Division Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler to surrender to the U.S. Army across the River Enns. Flouting the High Command's order to surrender, Colonel Peiper trekked homeward to Germany, where American forces captured him on May 22, 1945. In late June 1945, U.S. Army war crime investigators initiated the forensic investigation of the Malmedy massacre, committed by the Waffen-SS on December 17, 1944. The war crimes during the Battle of the Bulge were largely attributed to Battle Group Peiper, prompting the U.S. Army to search POW camps for Waffen-SS soldiers assigned to Peiper's command. Moreover, as the battle group commander, Peiper topped the list of war criminals sought by the U.S. Army among 4 million prisoners of war. On August 21, 1945,
Waffen-SS Standartenführer Peiper was located and identified as the suspected perpetrator of the war crime massacre of 84 U.S. soldiers in a farmer's field near Malmedy, Belgium. In July 1945, during interrogations by JAG and military intelligence officers, Peiper starkly revealed his unwavering commitment to Nazism. When army interrogators questioned his opinion about the plight of the Poles and the Jews, Peiper agitatedly replied, "All Jews are bad, and all Poles are bad. We have just cleansed our society and moved these people into camps, and you let them loose." Moreover, as a Waffen-SS officer, Peiper lamented to the army interrogators that the U.S. government was mistaken in refusing to incorporate the Waffen-SS into the U.S. Army to prepare to fight the Russians in defense of Western civilization. In Upper Bavaria, at the U.S. military jail in Freising, judicial and military intelligence interrogators soon discovered that despite being hardened soldiers, Peiper and his Waffen-SS troops had not been trained to withstand interrogation as prisoners of war. Psychologically unsophisticated, some SS POWs readily answered questions. Other SS POWs claimed they only spoke after enduring threats, beatings, and mock trials. In the course of his interrogations, Peiper assumed command responsibility for the actions of his soldiers. In December 1945, the Army transferred him to the prison at Schwabisch Hall, where Peiper joined a group of approximately 1,000 Waffen-SS soldiers and officers of the LSSAA, who also awaited judicial processing for their war crimes. On April 16, 1946, the prison transferred 300 Wehrmacht and Waffen-SS POWs to the Dachau concentration camp, where a military tribunal would hear their war crime cases.
The Malmedy Massacre Trial. From May 16 to July 16, 1946, at the Dachau concentration camp, a military tribunal presided over the Malmedy Massacre Trial. 74 defendants faced justice, including Waffen-SS Lieutenant Colonel Joachim Peiper, commander of the 1st SS Panzer Regiment, accused of committing the war crimes; Sepp Dietrich, commander of the 6th SS Panzer Army; Fritz Kramer, Dietrich's chief of staff; and Hermann Priess, commander of the 1 SS Panzer Corps. The U.S. Army's charges were meticulously built upon the sworn statements provided by party, Wehrmacht, and Waffen-SS POWs held at Schwabisch Hall Prison. To counter the evidence embedded in these sworn statements of the Nazi defendants and the prosecution witnesses, the lead defense attorney, Lieutenant Colonel Willis M. Everett, sought to demonstrate that these statements had been extracted through inappropriate interrogation methods. Defense counsel Everett then called Lieutenant Colonel Hal D. McCown, commander of the 2nd Battalion, 119th Infantry Regiment, to testify about his own captivity as a prisoner of war by the Waffen-SS, who had captured him and his unit on December 21, 1944, near La Glaise, Belgium. In his testimony, Lieutenant Colonel McCown stated that he had not witnessed Colonel Peiper's Waffen-SS soldiers mistreating their American prisoners of war. The prosecutor countered that by the time Lieutenant Colonel McCown and his soldiers were captured on December 21st, Battle Group Commander Peiper was already acutely aware of the perilous tactical situation. Outnumbered, outgunned, and outmaneuvered, Comp Group Peiper faced imminent capture by the U.S. Army. While on December 17, 1944, units of Battle Group Peiper at Malmedy, Belgium, were advancing towards their objectives, by December 21st, relentless firefights with the U.S. Army had fragmented and dispersed Battle Group Peiper, almost trapping Peiper's unit and Peiper himself at La Glaise.
At that point, Peiper's vehicles had little fuel, and his soldiers had suffered an 80% casualty rate. Defense counsel Everett called only Peiper to testify. In his testimony, Peiper spoke only of the cold calculation regarding the usefulness of his American prisoners of war. He testified that when Peiper Battle Group fled from the town of La Glaise, Colonel Peiper took Lieutenant Colonel McCown and some of his soldiers as hostages to protect his Waffen-SS soldiers from capture by the U.S. Army. Despite the damning and incriminating facts to which Peiper testified before the military tribunal, the other defendant SS men, encouraged by their German lawyers, unwisely requested the opportunity to testify. The prosecutor's cross-examinations compelled the SS men to behave like a bunch of drowning rats, turning on each other in a desperate bid for survival. Thus, the Nazi POW testimonies from both soldiers and officers regarding the Malmedy war crimes provided the military tribunal with ample reason to condemn several of the SS defendants to death. The military tribunal remained unconvinced by Peiper's testimony that, as the commanding officer of Battle Group Peiper, he, Colonel Peiper, bore no command responsibility for the summary execution of American prisoners of war by his Waffen-SS soldiers. When questioned about having ordered his soldiers to summarily murder Belgian civilians, Peiper claimed that the deceased were partisan guerrillas, not civilians. Two witnesses testified to having heard Peiper on two separate occasions order the summary execution of U.S. prisoners of war. Yet when the prosecutor pressed him on whether or not he gave those orders, Peiper vehemently denied the veracity of the eyewitness testimony, claiming it had been coerced from men under mental duress and physical torture.
Commuted sentence and post-war life. On July 16, 1946, the military tribunal for the Malmedy Massacre trial convicted Joachim Peiper of the war crimes he was accused of and sentenced him to be hanged. In the U.S. Army's judicial system, a death sentence is automatically reviewed by the U.S. Army Review Board. In October 1947, these death sentence reviewers commuted some verdicts to long imprisonment for Nazi war criminals. In March 1948, General Lucius D. Clay, the U.S. military governor of occupied Germany, reviewed 43 death sentences and confirmed the legality of only 12, including that of Waffen-SS Colonel Peiper. In 1951, regarding political maneuvering for the rehabilitation of Waffen-SS Colonel Joachim Peiper, ex-General Heinz Guderian informed a correspondent. Guderian: "At the moment, I am negotiating with General Handy in Heidelberg because he wants to hang the unfortunate Peiper. McCloy is powerless because the Malmedy trial is being handled by UCOM and is not subordinate to McCloy. As a result, I have decided to cable President Truman and ask him if he is familiar with this idiocy." In 1948, the judicial reviewers of the trial verdicts commuted the war crime death sentences of some Waffen-SS defendants in the Malmedy Massacre trial to life imprisonment. In 1951, Peiper's death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. In 1954, it was further commuted to 35 years imprisonment. He was eventually released on parole on December 22, 1956. When two U.S. soldiers informed Peiper of his release, he was so profoundly shocked that he simply stared at them in silence. The relentless political lobbying of the network of former SS men orchestrated Peiper's early release from prison and helped him find employment. The mutual aid community of former members of the Waffen-SS, HIAG, had already secured employment for Frau Peiper near Landsberg prison, where her husband was incarcerated. Thanks to the political influence of Albert Prinzing, a former functionary in the Sicherheitsdienst security service, Peiper found employment at the Porsche Automobile Company.
Revisionism and renewed scrutiny. Upon his release from Landsberg prison, Joachim Peiper maintained a discreet profile, publicly avoiding association with known Nazis, especially ex-Waffen-SS soldiers and the HIAG. Privately, however, Peiper remained a staunch Nazi true believer and an active member of the clandestine community of Waffen-SS veterans in the Federal Republic of Germany. In 1959, Peiper attended the national meeting of the Association of Knight's Cross recipients. He traveled with Walter Harzer, the HIAG historian, and reunited with Sepp Dietrich and Heinz Lammerding, both of whom had also been formally identified as Nazi war criminals. His active social life within the Waffen-SS community included public participation in the funerals of deceased Nazis such as Kurt Meyer, Paul Hauser, and Dietrich. Collaborating with the HIAG, Peiper secretly worked for the political rehabilitation of Waffen-SS soldiers and officers, meticulously suppressing their war crime records and misrepresenting them as mere war veterans of the Wehrmacht. Nevertheless, a certain self-awareness of his legalistic chicanery allowed Peiper to confess to a friend, "I personally think that every attempt at rehabilitation during our lifetime is unrealistic, but one can still collect material." On January 17, 1957, the Porsche Automobile Company in Stuttgart employed Peiper. During his employment, Italian trade union workers formally protested Peiper's presence, deeming him an unacceptable co-worker due to his continued Nazi beliefs and the wartime Boves massacre committed by his command, Kampfgruppe Peiper, in Italy. Ferry Porsche, and owner of the car company, personally intervened to promote Peiper into a management position. However, the trade unions legally refused to work with Peiper. Despite his friendship with Porsche, and due to lost car sales in the U.S. over the employment of a Nazi war criminal, the Porsche Automobile Company dismissed Peiper. On December 30, 1960, Peiper filed a lawsuit against Porsche. His attorney argued that Joachim Peiper was not a Nazi war criminal, claiming the Allies had used the Malmedy Massacre trial of 1946 as propaganda to defame the German people. Similarly, the Nuremberg trials and the Malmedy Massacre trial were presented as anti-German propaganda. Peiper's attorney cited documents by Frieda Uckley, a Holocaust denier academic, who alleged that the U.S. Army had tortured the Waffen-SS defendants in the Malmedy Massacre trial. The court ultimately ordered Porsche to void the employment contract and indemnify Peiper for his dismissal. Moreover, this job loss allowed Der Freiwillige, the official newspaper of the HIAG, to misrepresent Peiper as having been unfairly sentenced for war crimes committed by other Nazis. The HIAG then secured Peiper's employment as a trainer of car salesmen at the Volkswagen Automobile Company.
New prosecutions and the Bovis Monument. In the early 1960s, Cold War geopolitics in Western Europe necessitated transforming Germany from an enemy, Nazi Germany, into an ally, the Federal Republic of Germany, for eventual integration into NATO. Consequent to the relative denazification of German society, the economy of the Federal Republic of Germany disallowed ex-Nazis from concealing themselves among the educated staff of businesses in post-war Germany. A Nazi diploma was unacceptable for employment. The Adolf Eichmann trial in 1961 and the Frankfurt Auschwitz trials from 1963 to 1965 informed the world of the true, racist nature of Nazi Germany and its policies of official anti-Semitism and the final solution, the ultimate purpose of Nazism. Unlike the immediate aftermath of World War II, when the Allies prosecuted war crimes under a limited remit between 1945 and 1947, the Federal Republic of Germany continually extended the statute of limitations for war crimes prosecution. This enabled them to successfully hunt, capture, and prosecute war criminals from the Nazi Party, the Wehrmacht, the Waffen-SS, and the Gestapo. In their testimonies at these war crime trials in the FRG, Nazi war criminals repeatedly named SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper as an active participant in the massacres of civilians and POWs on both the Eastern and Western fronts.
Among the fellow Nazis who implicated Peiper in court were Karl Wolff, senior adjutant to Himmler, and Werner Grothmann, Peiper's successor as adjutant to Himmler. At trial, the court heard Erich von dem Bach-Zaleski, the Bandenbekämpfen chief for occupied Europe, speak of Himmler's plans to rid Russia of 30 million Slavic peoples, and Himmler's pronouncements at Minsk that he was determined to eliminate the Jews. In 1964, the village of Boves, Italy, erected a monument commemorating the victims of the Boves Massacre, perpetrated by Kampfgruppe Peiper on September 13, 1943. Offended by this explicit public identification as a war criminal, Peiper requested the Mutual Aid Association of former members of the Waffen-SS to legally defend him against this war criminal label. Peiper's defense attorney claimed that Italian communists had fabricated evidence to substantiate false Nazi war crime accusations. Peiper reiterated that Battle Group Peiper had been forced to destroy the village of Boves in the course of the Waffen-SS defense against communist partisans. On June 23, 1964, the Central Office of the State Justice Administration for the Investigation of National Socialist Crimes formally accused Peiper of perpetrating the Boves Massacre in 1943. The formal accusation was based on statements from two former partisans who recognized SS Lieutenant Colonel Joachim Peiper from two published photographs in a picture book about the Battle of the Bulge and from a photograph of SS Obersturmbannführer Peiper observing the incineration of the village of Boves. In 1968, the German district court in Stuttgart determined that Battle Group Peiper had set houses afire and that a portion of the victims killed was from rioting that was committed by the SS Waffen-SS soldiers. Nevertheless, despite the battle group's collective culpability for the war crime at Boves, there was no direct evidence of individual command responsibility that SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper had directly ordered the massacre of villagers at Boves, Italy.
Personal life and final years. In 1938, Peiper met and courted Sigurd Henriksson, a secretary who was a friend of Lena Heydrich, Reinhard Heydrich's wife, and Hedwig Potthast, Himmler's secretary and mistress. On June 26, 1939, Peiper married Sigurd in an SS ceremony with Himmler as the guest of honor. The Peipers lived in Berlin until its bombing in 1940, after which Sigurd Peiper moved to Rottach-Egern, Upper Bavaria, near Himmler's second residence. They had 3 children. In 1972, Joachim and Sigurd Peiper relocated to Traves, Haute-Saône, in eastern France, where he owned a house. Using the pseudonym Rainer Buschmann, Peiper worked as a self-employed English-to-German translator for the German publisher Stuttgarter Motorbuch Verlag, translating books on military history. Despite his biography and working pseudonymously, they resided under his true German name, Joachim Peiper, and soon attracted the attention of anti-fascists. In 1974, a former member of the French resistance recognized Peiper and reported his presence in metropolitan France to the French Communist Party. On June 21, 1976, an anti-Nazi political activists distributed informational flyers to the Traves community, informing them that Peiper was a Nazi war criminal residing among them. On June 22, 1976, an article in the L'Humanité newspaper confirmed Peiper's residence in the village. The confirmation of Peiper's Nazi identity and presence in France attracted journalists, to whom he readily granted interviews. In these interviews, he claimed to be a victim of communist harassment due to his wartime role. In an interview titled J'ai payé, I already have paid, Peiper asserted his innocence, stating that he had paid for his war crimes, referring to the Malmedy massacre, with 12 years of imprisonment. He denied any involvement in the earlier Boves massacre in Italy. He further ignited anger by declaring, "In 1940, French people weren't brave. That's why I'm here." These insulting remarks enraged both the press and local residents. Reports indicated that he and his wife subsequently left France, moving to West Germany due to death threats. On Bastille Day, July 14, 1976, French communists attacked and set fire to Peiper's house in Traves. When the fire was extinguished, firefighters discovered the charred remains of a man clutching a pistol and a .22 caliber rifle, seemingly in self-defense. Arson investigators concluded the individual had died from smoke inhalation. The anti-Nazi political group The Avengers claimed responsibility for the arson that killed Peiper. Nevertheless, due to the extensive destruction caused by the fire, some French police authorities remained unconvinced that the body found was indeed Joachim Peiper.
Neo-Nazi legacy. In the United States, Joachim Peiper has become an idol for neo-Nazi Americans who romanticize the Waffen-SS as German war heroes rather than recognizing them as Nazi war criminals. In the post-war period of the late 1940s and early 1950s, the cultural context, marked by xenophobic Russo-American Cold War tensions and reactionary McCarthyism, allowed historical, factual, and personal misrepresentations of Peiper to coalesce into a cult of personality. This cult was actively cultivated by certain right-wing organizations, such as the HIAG, who vehemently sought his early release from war crime imprisonment in West Germany. In American popular culture, Lieutenant Colonel Peiper's military bearing, good looks, commanding presence, and a chest adorned with Nazi medals garnered him many right-wing admirers within both civilian and military society. Alarmingly, the idolatry of Peiper infiltrated the official publications of the U.S. Department of Defense, DoD. In 2019, the DoD Facebook account included a colorized military photograph of Peiper in his Waffen-SS uniform as part of an audio-visual commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the U.S. Army fighting Wehrmacht and Waffen-SS soldiers at the Battle of the Bulge, which notably included the Malmedy massacre committed by Kampfgruppe Peiper. Peiper's Waffen-SS photograph provoked widespread backlash on social media because the DoD publication appeared to celebrate a Nazi war criminal as a German war hero. The DoD subsequently apologized and deleted the photograph. Despite this political misstep, the Pentagon later used Peiper's Waffen-SS photograph to represent the German enemy fighting the U.S. Army Airborne Corps in the Battle of the Bulge. Moreover, the Facebook page of the Army's 10th Mountain Division also featured Peiper's colorized Waffen-SS military photograph to represent the German enemy they fought in the Second World War. The Washington Post and the New York Times quoted Facebook commentators who described the DoD's positive military biography of the war criminal Joachim Peiper as a vile and disturbing exercise in historical negationism, which had the tone of a, quote, fanboy-flavored piece of right-wing propaganda, unquote. Furthermore, researchers from the Washington Post traced the source of Peiper's colorized photograph to the Twitter account of a pro-Nazi artist who publishes photographs of Nazis with captions expressing supportive praise for Nazism and Hitler. They concluded that it remains unclear how Pentagon and Army officials cleared an image apparently created by an artist who celebrates Nazi propaganda online to be published alongside a tribute to American soldiers who fought and died to defeat a fascist regime 75 years ago. But the misstep is just the latest in a month of embarrassing incidents for the U.S. Army, which has been recently slammed with multiple allegations of white supremacist activity.